Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with politics editor Jim Antle. And Jim, this week we saw another high-profile departure from Vice President Kamala Harris's office. What do you think all of this staff turnover says about the state of her operation right now?
So the vice president has had a reputation for mishandling her office and her personnel that really predates serving in the Biden administration. So this doesn't really look good, but it is to some extent to be expected because Simone Sanders was in charge of Vice President Harris's communications. You have a situation where she's gotten a lot of unflattering press recently. Some kind of a shakeup was probably necessary. Now, whether she's the scapegoat for this or whether, because clearly the product that you're selling has a big impact on what you can do in a communications role. But they're going to want to make some changes. And the clear-cut problem that they have is that with President Biden being the age that he is, but saying that he wants to run, and the possibility that he doesn't actually run for re-election, puts a spotlight on Harris that maybe wouldn't exist for other vice presidents. People don't feel that she has 6 or 7 years to rebound. The fact that she's polling worse than the president is frightens Democrats who are fearful that she's the next in line and she doesn't have a lot of time to recover politically. So this could be a first step in trying to make that recovery, or it could just be a continuation of the same.
This week, President Biden focused a lot on the Omicron variant and started rolling out a bunch of new travel restrictions and mitigation strategies to deal with this COVID variant. But politically, do you think there's a chance that all of these new restrictions could backfire on him?
Certainly a problem that Biden has right now is that COVID has become a culture war issue. That was certainly true to some extent under President Trump too, but it's become more so under him. And the perception that, one, he's overreaching, which is upsetting a lot of conservatives who aren't very big fans of the president anyway, but they don't like a lot of his heavy-handed, more mandate-oriented and mask-oriented approach to managing COVID. Some of them are obviously inflamed by what he's doing, but also a big part of why he won the election was that he was supposed to restore a certain degree of normalcy. And it looked like in the spring, as the vaccines were first rolling out, that was going to happen. But the Delta variant and then this new variant, the Omicron variant, and the vaccine hesitancy that's existed, all of those things have made this not look like it's really over, and we still feel like we're in the pandemic. And that's been a real problem for Biden. And Biden's numbers on COVID are still higher than they are on most other issues, in fact, on any other issue. But as they've kind of fallen back down from the stratosphere, I mean, there was a point where he was polling over 70% on his management of the pandemic. As that's kind of become more of a push, he's now underwater on almost everything else, and he's certainly underwater overall. So the pandemic was really propping up his approval ratings before, and as he's become more controversial on that issue, his ratings have gone down.
Well, speaking of controversial, President Biden's vaccine mandates keep getting blocked in federal court. What do you think the likelihood is that we will see that workplace vaccine mandate go into effect in January as Biden initially wanted?
I think the odds of that are low. What the vaccine mandate for the private sector companies has maybe arguably accomplished is that a lot of companies that wanted to do it but were a little hesitant are doing it, justifying it based on this mandate potentially coming down the pike. But for the private sector employees, not for the federal workers, but for the private sector employees, this was always fairly legally dubious. It follows in the footsteps of what he tried to do with the eviction moratorium. He has attempted now multiple times to do things that he was kind of advised were constitutionally a little problematic. He's pressed ahead with them anyway, has been struck down by the courts. It's part of the larger challenge he faces on the pandemic, which is why the White House is kind of going back to talking about how Donald Trump told everybody to drink bleach and things like that. The fact that they're still having to contrast themselves with Trump on this because their mandates are getting shut down and because the variants keep emerging and this has been a very stubborn issue really isn't where they want it to be at this point.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more reporting from Jim and the rest of the political team at WashingtonExaminer.com.